we need your mic.
Okay, thank you. Growing luminous. On the mystic path, we create our own light. And at first we struggle, blind and baffled, seeing nothing, hearing nothing, unable to think, unable to imagine. We seem deserted by dream, vision, or inspiration, and our meditation barren altogether. But let us persist through weeks or months, or sooner or later, that stupor disappears. Our faculties readjust themselves and do the work we will them to do. Never did they do their work so well. The dark caverns of the brain begin to grow luminous. We are creating our own light. George William Russell.
Right. Thank you so much. So in this year of Light on the Path for 2025, the topic that we're going to take up today at Gems from the Still and Moving Center, it's Gems from the Wisdom Traditions from the Still and Moving Center, is one that is inspired by the fact that this week on Friday, a wonderful gentleman named William Quan Judge has his death anniversary, and his last words before passing were, "There should be calmness, hold fast, go slow," which seems to indicate such a remarkable steadiness of heart that we thought this would be a very appropriate theme for this week. And we have the privilege of having Maurice Bishop, Dr. Maurice Bishop, give us our presentation today from the tradition of Theosophia, which is the tradition from which William Quan Judge spoke and taught. And Maurice has studied the teachings of Theosophia or Theosophy for quite a few decades. He's been a frequent speaker here at Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, and we're very grateful to have him. In my personal experience with Maurice, he has an enormous heart that is always very steady.
Well, thank you, Renee, for such an introduction. I like to keep it steady, but sometimes my heartbeat does go up and down a lot. But anyway, it's good to see and meet all of you here. And so we're considering the notion of studying the heart. And we could start with maybe a quote from Chankracharya, which is a great from the Indian traditions, where he said that quietude is the holding of mind and heart steadily on the goal. And so later on, we might take up the idea of what is the goal of studying the heart. But there's no question that all through literature and all through Star Wars and all through a lot of different movies, people are always trying to coordinate the head and the heart. The heart are deep feeling, more love and universal expansiveness in our thoughts and in our actions. But at the same time, we have to have a mind that kind of cooperates with that or even lets that happen. So there's this quote, "The heart has its reasons, which reason knows nothing about."
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times, even though things are kind of conventional and everything, our intuition and our conscience something from inside, because the heart tends to, when we usually talk about the heart, it's usually turning inward. And we get these intuitions, or the still small voice, or something that says things are off, or it could be even a defiance to what's considered reasonable. I mean, we're all reasonable people, right? But there's something that about a sense of justice or injustice, a sense of it just not hitting the mark, whatever it is, where from the heart we get this sense of intuition and conscience. And then and then as we know, sometimes people are good-hearted, but they can be duped pretty easy. We know that some people might be good-hearted, but they may have a fickle heart. They may love one thing one time and not another. We also know people that sometimes, even though their heart may lie in one place, they rationalize the situation with their mind, and it begins to overtake their moral vision. And we're certainly challenged these days because sometimes moral vision will allow shallow values to, no pun intended, trump clear thinking. So the working with the mind and the heart seems to be kind of central to steadying the heart. And but we have some models, some great ideals, but you can call them models, that were been given in the great Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu tradition of the self-governed sage. And one of the qualities or virtues of the sage is that of magnanimity, of kind of a great soul. And in the Voice of the Silence, which is a Buddhist, ancient Buddhist text, it tells us to be like the ocean, which receives all streams and rivers. The ocean's mighty calm remains unmoved. It feels them not. So we have a notion of a sage or that where all the streams flow in, but they're accepted, they're synthesized maybe into other streams, right? But it doesn't necessarily move the governing factor of the direction or the intuition or the heart that thinks what's true. And of course, many statues of the Buddha, for example, demonstrate this calmness in various ways and with various symbolism. But even if one just looks at the statue and then ponders its qualities, not as an idol, so to speak, but just the qualities of, one of the qualities will come out is the notion of calmness, of kind of steadying the heart. But in addition, we still need the mind, because in order to steady the heart really can't be steady if our passions are raging. And it's moving us from side to side like an ocean sea that's just going back and forth, and and everything is just kind of, and it's very difficult to remain steady. But of course, a sea captain has to remain such a steady, even in such waters. So they're always looking for light or a lighthouse or lights or something that will allow them to be steady while the raging passions of the sea go on. And this is essentially what some of the great teachers tell us, that when we can subdue these passions and go and move ourselves internally to be guided by a compass, a moral compass, if you will, in our heart, that we can then act much better and see much more clearly what needs to be done to benefit others, and to elevate others, and to see ourselves actually as not being so separate from others, because we have this motive that lights a fire in our heart to help people, to be compassionate. So let's think about the heart as a metaphor with a few attributes, for example. And of course, one that we're very familiar with is that from the heart comes love. And you can go to any bookstore, and I'm sure you all have books that have these magnificent quotes about love, like, love is what fills the emptiness beside me, or the emptiness within. Or love can uplift others in ways that we may not even know. So we know that this is really the human condition in a way. And that, but in order that our love not be fickle, that it's more steady and steadfast, we can somehow have to put our mind and our consciousness and abide in something that's larger than ourselves, and in fact, more steady and more permanent. For love, when we love something, we attach to the object, at least briefly, or at least identify with it, right? And if the object's moving or dissolving all the time, it's difficult to sustain a kind of steadiness at times. But if we really want to start to create in our consciousness something that's more permanently steady or steadfast, if you will, than just temporary at the moment, that's going to take something besides not just love as sort of gushing, but it's going to take something that also, as of course many of the religious traditions teach us, we need through thought and imagination. And we're told that in order to do this as part of living our life every day, then we need to discipline and overcome our negative emotions. We know that could be anger and greed and anything that smacks of a motive of violence or appropriation or lust or something like that. And that then allows us, if we're become more and more self-aware or self-conscious of that, to, even if we slip into it, we can immediately become aware of it and slip out of it. And in doing so, it begins to help us calm the mind, cool the mind. And in doing so, then, through thought and imagination, we can actually not only discipline our love, but expand it. Because through thought and imagination, when we're not constricted and focused on passions, we can transfer passion into compassion. And it's through using our minds, our thoughts, and our imagination, our love, to think about the needs of others rather than ourselves. So we are told, like in The Voice of the Silence, that if you wish to start a spiritual path, that purifying the mind and the heart is the precondition, and altruism, meaning thinking about others first, is the first step. So a lot of studying the heart then depends on where you want to put your mind. Now we can do a little experiment here. And what I'd like you to do is to, and you don't have to do it on screen, so you could do it as a thought experiment, is to point to yourself, point to yourself. Where do you point? Do you point to your feet? Probably not. What about pointing to your head? Probably not. But you would probably be pointing somewhere close to your heart, because the heart is the core of our being. And it comes from the French word, which I won't pronounce at all, courrier, which actually comes from having the virtue of courage. So the studying in the heart has something to do with courage. It's like we prove our commitment to our values by cherishing them at the core of our being. What is it that we cherish at the core of our being? It may be a new car or a new house, situationally, but certainly anything permanent really comes from our core, and we naturally point to our core when we look at our true self. So the heart is really part and parcel of where we're coming from and our true self. So it's always good to get in touch with our heart, especially before we act. Now, also, if we look at our heart, it also kind of means that we're perceiving value, that, and because that's where our desire principle lies. If we look at our heart, we can take an inventory, if we're calm, of course, of where our desires are, and behind desires are our motives, maybe, but and there's nothing wrong with whatever one comes up with, whether it's getting a new car or thinking about the next vacation next year, or do we value something more, like being more compassionate to other human beings, connecting with others to form a nucleus of universal brotherhood? And of course, this could change during phases in our life, but the heart is the one that where our desire principle lies. And the great thing about it is that we can change our desires. That's where our mind comes in, because our mind can look at our desires and say, I'm just not interested in that anymore, which is part of normal growing up, where, maybe people used to play with toy cars, and then some day, like Puff the Magic Dragon, it just all went away, and Puff Magic Dragon isn't there anymore, and neither are the toy cars. So we can elevate our desires, and we can do it in two ways. One is through moral restraint. When we see our more base desires, our lower desires, our more materialistic, our more animal-like desires, really starting to drive us, we can restrain them. Doesn't have to be tight, but it does need to be a restraint. That's what a yoga is a yoke, right? It doesn't have to squeeze too hard, but they do need some pressure. It does need some kind of conscious work. But what's usually also, and a lot of times missing, is that if that's really may not be enough, we may, in order to elevate our desires, need to put our minds in something that absorbs us, that's beyond the earth, beyond the terrestrial, beyond the ever-changing. Can we put our minds on something that's something on the higher self, that something doesn't change, but is the observer, the watcher, blending our mind and our heart, a universal principle, like maybe aspiring to more truth and nonviolence. So when we want to elevate our desire, it's not enough maybe just to keep the animal, decide to discard it, and not keep a habit of going back to the lower desire, but to find something that's of a higher desire. So it's through desire, and it's the desires then lie in the heart, on which the mind then takes it and energizes it. And that's why the mind and the heart work so close together. Now, another aspect, of course, of heart is really taking action. getting to the essential of things, and that's moving toward doing something for other people. And again, one of the difficulties is we've probably in our society, myself much included, have taken things in the head and taken intellectual things or beautiful ideals that are written and sort of keep them in the head and articulate them. And so maybe for 200 years, like America, we've always thought about our systems of laws, right? Checks and balances and constitutions, and they do reflect something of the heart. But they can also become very mechanical and very much in the head. And maybe what we're learning, whether we like it or not, or whether it's fair or not, that systems of laws are not systems of love. And that love comes from free and active volition, and it really comes from the heart. So we need to I'm not saying we shouldn't have laws, but again, it's this balancing of the head and the heart without splitting them up so much that one can't impact and influence the other. And finally, then, what does this have to do with daily practice? And this is where it's challenging in a way, because in almost all the great religions, they're really asking us to do something that's very high. They're asking us to put our mind and abide, to put our heart in the Supreme Spirit. The Bhagavad Gita says that to put one's mind on the Supreme Spirit. Why? Because the Spirit is not part of changing matter. It's not part of the karma or the changes that go on with cause and effect that influence the body, and the body is changing. Even our minds are changing, because eventually we have birth and death, and that creates sickness and suffering, et cetera, et cetera. And they're saying, well, we are not of the world, but we are in it. So we're both transcendent and immanent, and it goes very high. And this is kind of mind blowing to me, but then I'm in my head a lot, because the spirit is formless and it's unknowable. So the Rig Veda of the Hindu tradition says not was, or it says Parabrahm. So we really don't know. It's unknowable. It's not in relation to us or to all this karma and all this kind of thing. That is the highest, and that is where spirit comes, or is reflected. It doesn't really come, because nothing comes out of it, but it's really just reflected. And in the Jewish tradition, the Kabbalists talk about the Ein Sof, the one without a second. And in Genesis, the Spirit of God that moves upon the face of the waters of the earth. And what we're told, at least in the Theosophical tradition, that all three of these traditions are talking about the same thing. They're all identical. In Buddhism, looking at Bodhidharma, the spirit itself knows neither increase or decrease. Their minds abide serenely in the uncreated, while the body turns about it in accord with causation and with inevitable suffering. So in all these traditions, they're really pointing to something that's very high. And so the question is, how can we do something in daily practice, in daily life, that could even begin to approximate what we're being asked to do by those great teachers who have come before us in different traditions at different times. So just a few suggestions, and then we could start the conversation. That obviously it's the spirit that animates the heart, and the heart is our witness, and in some traditions, there is one God hidden in every creature, in all creatures. And it pervades the inmost self of all beings, the watcher over all things, abiding in all things, the witness, the heart, the absolute, attributeless and free. So, where can we find something like this in our experience? Well, one of the places we could find this is in our deep sleep. That we all know that if we have a very good night's sleep and we have a very deep sleep, we wake up refreshed. And we even know, at least most people do, who they are the next morning in name and form. If you get older, sometimes you don't remember what day it is, but at least you're on it, you know. And so you have a situation where you're where it's beyond cognition, so to speak. And so what would happen if you take your best thought before you go to bed and see what happens if you remember it or if it comes to you when you wake up? That's very challenging. It's not going to happen maybe the first time. And of course, we know there are a lot of dreams and a whole lot of other consciousness going on, much of which we've provoked in our actions, and then they come out in kind of funky dreams or interesting dreams or pointers. But that's kind of one way of just sensing and giving obeisance to something we don't know, maybe, but something that is the most real and the most true, that will influence that in us, that spark in us. That's where we come from, and that spark in the heart. So that would be one thing to do. Another way to approach this is by having moments of silence. Now, one could achieve that maybe through meditation or maybe through something else. But what silence allows us to do is to allow the chattering mind to begin to unchatter a bit and for the heart to begin to take over and envelop. But yet we still don't know. If it's silence, it's silence. But from that can emanate, just like as we wake up, wonderful intuitions. If one comes to it with the right motive, that one is doing this for others, for compassion, for humanity and all of humanity, and not just for our selfish needs of, oh, I like to be more mentally alert or something like that. So those are two ways of trying to even get to the highest process. But in summary then, in terms of the steadfast or becoming more steady in the heart, again, it really also depends upon us cultivating our minds. We could do that through wonderful spiritual texts. We could do it through meditation, we have to do it through whatever one chooses, because each person's different. So it's whatever one chooses to do to try to get above the turba of the day and to try to get a sense of something transcendent, something of the spirit that does not have form, or at least approach it. And if that doesn't work, then we can go back to being the ideal of the self-governed sage. What are the qualities of that sage that allows all the streams in, but is essentially still unmoved? And how would that help others? Because it is, if the one God is hidden in every creature and pervades the inmost self of all beings, not just us, then whatever we're doing, we're creating and developing magnetic attractions through our thoughts and through our heart quality that attract others. And in doing so, develop a natural compassion above the ebb and flow of likes and dislikes and our passions and other things during the day. So this does take training, but the heart is just really our center, and it's just wonderful to be there, especially with the mind when we can. So with that, a lot of different ideas, but we're open for a conversation.
Thank you so much, Maurice. I was so glad to hear you spend so much time on the connection between the heart and mind. I think maybe it's Krishna who says that the heart, the feelings, the emotions are as difficult to control as the wind. And I think it is more easily in our power to control the thoughts. And then according to the thoughts we have, we're going to be attracting different emotions into the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a very helpful line of thought that you were able to follow through all the way through your presentation.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being clear about the thread.
Oh, yeah,
Wonderful.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think Maurice is asking us in what do we do in our daily practice to find a steadiness of heart. And maybe I would add in, what challenges do you find in doing so? And maybe you have what one of our one of our favorite people at Still a Moving Center is Doris Morisaki, and she's always talking about life hacks. Life hacks. They're these little things that we can do to make something work when it otherwise might not. So what life hacks do you have for maintaining steadiness of heart when it might be difficult? Michael, you like this talk. Do you have anything you'd like to comment upon?
Well, I did have some thoughts. Made me think of last week's topic about the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
When we're looking at, not being carried away, but finding the right course of action, and made me think of one of America's possibly greatest karma yogins. I see on the bookshelf behind you, you have a number of books about Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
And I'm seeing him on the field of battle, pondering, I don't want all this death and destruction and catastrophe, but this has to be done.
Yeah.
So just made some connections.
Yeah, well, Abraham Lincoln is really, really interesting because one of the things that he's able to do, well, he does two things. One, as the book, The Team of Rivals, talks about, he brings into his cabinet all his opponents, which you rarely see today, because he wanted different views. And he would listen, he would go around and listen, but then he would go and ponder and deliberate. And that's when sometimes you have to first honor the gods, as Pythagoras would say, and then while you deliberate. And in this deliberation, maybe it is a way of bringing the heart and the mind together. Because on one hand, your heart feels this, your mind feels the other. Now, what we usually find is that conscience or heart may at least point the way or point us away from doing something we don't want to do. So both Lincoln and Gandhi before they did something, they would listen to everyone very sincerely, make sure they understood them, make sure they try to get the whole situation, and they try to include factors in that. So it was more of a rounded decision than a polarity, a right angle decision. It was rounded. How both the landlords and the peasants can be helped by this, or see the benefit of this, as opposed to just one faction or another. So there was a lot of deliberation. But then Lincoln would go, and he would go to his opponents, who were pretty rigid out there, and he would make friends with them. Rather than push the issue, he would start making small talk or friendship. And of course, he was great at wit and humor. So he would say, I have a story to tell you. And he would tell the story. And then pretty soon everyone would be relaxed, because in wit and in humor, there's detachment. And I think part of the key, if you want to bring the heart into action, is the heart has to connect. You have to connect not at the level of just the head, but you have to, in a sense, change feelings, not just facts, if you will. And so you have to prepare the ground. There's a preparation. And so it is really interesting to see Lincoln doing this a lot. He wasn't always successful, but a lot of times he really was. And a few times he had to do what he had to do, that his heart and his conscience had to carry it, even though everyone else told him not to do it or they don't like it. So it's really amazing. Maybe Carolyn has something more she wants to add to that about the heart and conscience and how Lincoln or others have done it.
Do have a question that's it's kind of parallel to the one you just placed. Oh, now it's gone out of my head. The idea that the phrase from, popular music, it takes two to tango. Now, does that apply to this discovery of love in the heart in a true way, you might say? It doesn't sound, well, does it sound that this process of studying the heart involves a lot of self-reliance and a propensity to discover individuation, because other people distract us, irritate us, puzzle us. But would you comment on how dependent are we on how others treat us, or how we feel about others, to actually steady the heart?
Okay. Well, maybe someone else has a comment. Diana, did you have something you'd like to add?
I don't know how this fits, but this is, when you were talking, I kept getting the symbol of the yin yang, and it's like mind and heart, but then around the yin yang is spirit. And I really I haven't really thought about desire coming from the heart, and then the mind. What you said was we can elevate our desires through moral restraint, or putting our minds on something that absorbs us beyond the earth. And so I think those are really important, because I think that there is automatic reactivity, and then we have the choice to respond. And Carolyn, it's like, for me, others' responses do come in, and yet then I have to check with my heart. And my practice is meditation, but it's like that helps me hear the words and not attach to them as their truth. You know, it's like there's something beyond and underneath the words that I can rest in. And it's through that spirit that allows us to move with a with a higher goal of compassion and love for self and others. And I think that for me, I hadn't thought about how the mind and heart work together like that. So that was really helpful, Maurice. I really like that. And I don't think that answers the question, but that's the image that I got, because I think it is spirit that holds it all together and helps us. Because people say, oh, I feel it in my heart. Well, then where do we use the mind to really move to action? And I think that's really important, because we can desire all sorts of things, but then how do we take action in the world? So that was really helpful. Thank you, Maurice.
Oh, thank you. Well, Carolyn's question is an interesting one. If it takes two to tango, and how do we react to others? And it seems that first, of course, we have to go inside and see what we value in the situation. And unfortunately, sometimes when we value something, it could exclude other values, right? Otherwise, we value everything. Or at least there's a scale, maybe. But that once we understand that, then we can listen to other people and begin the tango. Because other people might say things that will expand our view, or maybe turn us even in a slightly different direction. And then the dance starts, right? I'm not a tango expert, but and actually that leads us to the going from disharmony to harmony. And in order to do that, one though has to, I think, move from passions, being just stuck on an object, that stuck on something which is very changeful, very fickle. And I think, I don't know much about tango. I'll leave it to those who know, but I think there's a lot of fickleness there somehow. But in the end, I guess the idea is to take that disharmony and translate it into something that has more harmony, to sift through the mind, to discriminate or to sift elements that are good that everyone has or expresses or needs, and put it together into a new frame, a new harmony, a new way of which people can tango together, which is inclusive. And in fact, we've probably heard that phrase, drawing the larger circle. You know, Love and I had the wit to win. We drew a larger circle and drew them in. So maybe Carolyn's onto something. Maybe we should take some tango lessons.
Well, the tango looks very almost wild, it seems, but it's definitely a lot of motion. But actually, if you study or you recognize in people who know the dance, it's one of great precision. The feet have very precise points that they are supposed to make, wall in motion. So maybe there's room for some thought on that line.
I kind of like swing myself. Don't mean a thing unless it's got swing. Someone else?
Yeah, I can comment from the standpoint of dance that any partner dancing, actually, when you mention, Maurice, that first we have to go from within and find out what we value, that is finding our steady center, which would be like studying the heart, I think. And it's a matter of finding balance and posture. And it's really impossible for people to properly dance with one another unless each of them has their own sense of balance. Otherwise, we're always tipping the other over, dragging them down. So we really have to hold our own. And then these much more intricate movements that one does can be done in coordination, in harmony with the other person. However, unless we have our own balance, that isn't going to be possible. The whole thing's going to become a tangle, and they might both go down. However, when they do, the combined effect of two people dancing together, and it could be in a larger group sometimes of, you can have a group dance of many people dancing together, is very, very powerful. And it points to how when we are able to work in coordination and harmony with one another, we can affect something quite beautiful, quite magical.
Mhm. And also, Renee, it's really interesting that you mentioned balance and posture, because with the image of the ideal of the self-governed sage, what does it mean to be self-governed? One has to have that balance and mental posture. One has to be detached, discerning, yet immediately responsive and compassionate, hearing the pain. But you can hear the pain if you're not involved in this or that, so to speak, but you're able to have that balance. I think the Greeks, Carolyn might help on this, talked about sophrosony, a very steadfast mind that had balance and posture. But for it to be authentic, it has to come from the heart. And in order to change someone else's opinion or to really have a conversation, and conversation is different than a discussion, right? Discussion is like percussion. It's kind of beating around back and forth and all that. But a conversation is a rounded conversing. The C-O-N part of it is a way of going around in a circle. And that is, as you say, very powerful. So the heart is the point that illumines the insight, the intuition, the spark, that allows one to then use the mind to fashion that, if one is detached, that balance and posture. So I think your analogy in dance might also apply to the self-governed sage.
Yeah, you make a really good point as well, that when we do have that self-aligned posture, that balance, it then does allow us to be very responsive. Then the slightest little inclination from the partner, we can immediately pick up on and respond to. When we're struggling to hold our own balance, we tend to get very rigid. And we don't have that same kind of supple responsiveness to one another. We're just striving to stay upright, and it's a very awkward and tight kind of way to hold oneself. And so applying that to the mind and the heart, how do we keep a clear mind? How do we keep a steady heart? And yet steady doesn't mean hard, does it? No. Yeah, it's balanced.
It does mean, how would you put concentration in there? Because, and I would see it as a master would be absorbed in, like a musician isn't worrying about how they're going to pick the strings. Their mind is on these harmonies and they're just doing it. They're such a master of the details, of the discipline and of the details, that they're really, it's concentration becomes absorption.
Right.
And the purpose of meditation over, especially if you see it over more than one life, or is to become more and more absorbed in that which is still. or that which does not move. And that kind of absorption, which can be done at inner points during the day, just through mini meditations or looking at great poetry or whatever one chooses, all of a sudden one's mind then becomes absorbed out of things that are changeful and ever-changing and emotional and passionate. So this notion of concentration on the still point for a master, and then that allows for a whole variety of spontaneity, it seems. A lot of times people think, well, oh, why really become absorbed in all the dimensions of a universal principle like truth and nonviolence? Well, what makes a universal principle, or love for all beings or something, is that it's a bit above the earth and it's transcendent. It applies to all at a certain way, although all may take it differently. And that's the point. With the universal principle, you have endless applications. You have endless ways of understanding it. You have the endless responses, as you were pointing out. And you're able, and the more you're absorbed in that, the way you're blending your mind into your heart, because your heart is the portal to the universal.
You're bringing up a quote from yesterday to mind. It was from Einstein, whose birthday was yesterday on March 14th, 3.14, which is yesterday was also Pi Day. I think that's so cool. He was born on 314. Anyway, his quote for the day was, only one who devotes his whole strength and soul can be a true master. For this reason, mastery demands all of a person. And part of that mastery, when you're asking about, what about concentration? Well, as Carolyn mentioned, a dance like tango, much like a dance like, deep mathematics, does have, just an infinitude of tiny details that actually form a greater pattern of and whole. And one needs to go down into the level of the details, the precision of all those little steps, the lift of the hand, the turn of the elbow perhaps, or whatever it is. One does need to, on the path towards mastery, really be willing to go into all those little details, really learn it. And it's only when you have gone through that discipline that then you can, be able to zoom out, still be absorbed in performing those little details, but you're doing it from that flow state, shall we say, that higher perspective. You have become so intimate with the details that now you can transcend them. And that's how you actually get into that higher, more universal state of mind and heart, and they're fused because you're now in something that is approaching spirit. Yeah. Well, we have about 5 more minutes. Love to hear anything that this has sparked for you. If you're at a point where you'd like to mention a takeaway, this might be a good time for that. Go ahead, Michael. You've got so much going on. I just love watching your head and your eyes. What's coming to heart?
Well, of course, Krishna said the way we should act and make decisions is to always keep, the supreme in mind, and always act as a dedication, a sacrifice to the ultimate. So, not getting hung up in particularities, but always maintaining the widest focus as we act in the world.
Yeah. And as we act in the world, oh, go ahead, Diana.
Oh, I was just thinking, especially with where the world is right now, having conversations that we are seen and heard on either side is very difficult because there's such a rigidity on both sides. And really working on our heart can feel all the pain and all that's going on, but then our mind, for me, I want to know what's going on, but I don't want to live in that fear and anger. I want to live light and love. So it's like my mind helps me, and my practice helps me move away from it, so it's not so personified, and then I can choose action. I think I wish that Lincoln was alive and he could make all this stuff go away, but that's not likely going to happen. So it's like, how do we continue to listen to spirit and divine and really hear our actions? Because the anger and the fear, I do feel those, and yet I don't want to live there because I'm taking my joy away and giving my power away. And so then, and knowing how do we act and respond, and knowing that people that I love very dearly really have just opposite viewpoints, and it's like, to be allowing them to have their viewpoints with, and still loving them and being with them without having to cut it off. And so how do I keep that compassion in my heart and yet keep my own values and what's important to me? So I think it's a really important conversation, especially nowadays. So thank you.
Yeah, it is challenging. And what Krishna said about action is not only to do it on behalf of the Supreme Spirit, but then to be able to let go of the fruits of action. That doesn't mean you let go of the quality of but you try not to have your identity based on the results of likes and dislikes, but rather you try to look at it impartially and self-correct, because Gandhi, among others, always self-corrected all the time. Because the reality is in the Supreme Spirit, and we're here to have experiments in truth. Now, so the question is, like with Diana's point, which is really a tough one for all of us, I think, is how do we keep the conversation going, but not get so enmeshed in it, or go so enmeshed in the television. uh, um, and that's, I guess, to some extent, that's self-devised for different people. But I think having a group like this or other groups of people, not that people have to be like-minded, but being in a group that has elevating thoughts is a center of renewal, is a nucleus of universal brotherhood, if you want to call it that. And that's radiating out, that we're not separate. And so that's maybe the key, is to not think, when we get into that funny mood that, well, this is difficult, we're going to go through it, but we do have our practice and we do have our Sangha. And all of that is radiating out magnetic ties to other people, and hopefully creating magnetism where people will be attracted to you or your group or like-minded people. So it is a matter of not knowing what the ultimate good is, but knowing that there is a path forward to the good, and not having to hold on to the results. But as Michael pointed out, place and abide oneself, the spirit, which animates the heart, in the universal spirit. So.
Yeah. And I think also when we don't so engage on that mental conflict level and we hold to that higher view and higher connection with others, it actually gives both of us the opportunity to change our minds a bit. It keeps them from locking into a position and gives them a little bit more latitude, perhaps, as situations change, to maybe think of things from the other view, because we didn't lock them into a corner.
That reminds me of something Rumi said about there's me and you, but I'll meet you out there.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to let you know about our next 2 weeks, and then I'll ask for someone to give Maurice a vote of thanks. Next week, we are going to hear about the topic of noetic psychology from someone who has been studying psychology and is now a psychological counselor, David Sanders, and he's going to be looking at it from, I think I have the psychiatrist's name not coming to me. It's not Carl Rogers, it's somebody else. And then the week after that, we are going to hear about elevating our energy. And if I'm correct, we're going to hear about that from Deshane and Jade, who are our Qigong teachers. And that should be a lot of fun. Would somebody like to share with us their gratitude for Maurice? His presentation.
I will.
Thank you, Carolyn.
I admit I've not paid much attention to the studying the heart in a deeper way. So I'm very grateful to Maurice for giving us such a in-depth commentary, but then it reached out to a global concern of compassion and service. He prepared so well that we certainly have a lot to think about. And I know that he has thought about this focus of the heart qualities. So he really shared with us a great deal of great deal of what you could we need to open up, both for within ourselves and in our service and participation in a universe that has 8 billion people in it right now. So that really, I think, gave us a lot to dwell on and to use in very practical ways, but also to encounter the really tough challenges we have if we're really going to develop and use our mind properly, and if we're going to nourish a community feeling in every situation that we're in. So thank you, Maurice.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Beautifully presented. Thank you for all of your attention and comments. Good questions. Wonderful.
Aloha. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening and discussing, and
It was
it was
great.
wonderful, beautiful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Ahui ho.
Aloha.